Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now tomorrow we're gonna have a very big day for Marvel Concept Champions with 8.4 finally being released and effectively the Valiant floodgates being opened for a significant portion of the community. At the same time we do have a new Battlegrounds season, and honestly Battlegrounds as a game mode seems to be largely kind of struggling at the moment. That is going to be my next video I record. But this video is first we need to get down to the business and break down the upcoming season, the metas, the potential MVPs, and how it's going to look like. So it's going to be a bit different. A lot of people will have issues with obviously the week 3 and week 4 meta, which I'm not going to talk about too much, but it is going to be X Magic and Magic Thief alongside with a handful of other nodes. So that is going to be significantly more rough. But today I'm going to be talking about Victory Track and week 1 and week 2 meta in Gladiator Circuit. And to make it super simple in this type of video, so week 1, Victory Track metas are all of the defender's attacks are guaranteed critical hits. This is disabled for 10 seconds if the attacker dodges or intercepts the defender. The defender can land critical hits through block. Using the Dexterity Mastery to dodge an attack grants the attacker a passive Fury Charge, increasing the attack rating by 5%. At 10 Fury Charges, they're all lost, and opponents unblockable for 15 seconds. And obviously Dauntless, starting with a half striker field. So here, I will basically have no real comments, no real remarks, because it is about as open meta as you can have. The Bob and Weave node can be disabled by a simple dex or an intercept. There will be times when we either forget about it or it comes back online inconveniently, and then champions with undexable special attacks obviously will pose bigger problems than they necessarily should. But at large, it's a bit of a nothing node, same as Counter-Strike. So this is effectively an arena-like Victory Track meta, which is something that we're getting more and more used to recently. So it's basically like nothing happening, really. Or very, very, very little happening. Right. That said, there is one champion that I do need to point out, and that champion is going to be Ebony Maw. I'm sure that there are a couple more interesting interactions with defenders landing guaranteed critical hits, but here, the biggest thing is Ebony Maw obviously forces a guaranteed miss against all the defenders. That means Ebony Maw will have outsized, oversized impact. Also in weeks 1 and 2 Gladiator Circuit meta. Because only thing you have to do is, let opponent dash in at you. They're going to phase through that. They're going to get that degeneration. You let them, phase through once or twice. And then you can either go for a 5-hit combo, special attack or whatever, because they're going to keep on missing. The biggest thing with Ebony Maw is, don't accidentally intercept after their first hit, and that's about it. Opponents will, unless they are science class champions, will never be able to strike Ebony Maw. The only question will be how fast he can close out the fight. But yeah, if you have a duped 7-star Ebony Maw, even unduped 7-star Ebony Maw, it's probably quite a solid rank up for the next Victory Track and also Gladiator Circuit. Guaranteed cheese levels of fun. But since this effectively is arena meta, the rules here are going to be extremely simple. Bring in your best Battlegrounds champions. Your toughest defenders, your serpents and your onslaughts and your bullseyes and your photons and your biggest offensive nukes, your CGRs and your whatnot, whoever you have ranked up the highest, those champions will do just fine. Therefore, in today's video, we're going to be mainly looking at the Gladiator Circuit meta, which adds fisticuffs in the equation. The changes to the node is obviously because we have Bob and Weave 2, which means that you disable it for 8 seconds instead of 10 up on the Interceptor Dex, and Counter-Strike you only get to go up until 7 Furies, which are more potent, but then opponent goes unblockable for 12 seconds. So you only have like 5 Dexes basically until opponent goes unblockable, which is more likely to happen, which can catch you off guard. Other than that, this obviously changes fundamentally. with the neither champion can activate buffs or debuffs for the first 20 seconds of the fight. And 20 seconds is quite a long time in Battlegrounds fights, considering that many of them finish up to 40 to 60 second mark. And a lot of champions are unable to get going if they can't gain buffs or inflict debuffs. And a lot of defenders will be automatically hindered, as well as attackers. Obviously, with that, for instance, the champion that I have personally loved recently, Red Skull. Fisticuffs completely destroys Red Skull. He doesn't get any of his armor ups at the beginning of the fight, nor for the first 20 seconds, and chances are he's going to be dead by the time he gains a couple. So there will be definite changes, and the funny thing is that this Fisticuffs at large obviously hits other classes more than it does, well, some others. So looking at everything like equally, Science class is quite damaged by it as well. There are a handful of champions that will ignore Fisticuffs, which I think are going to see a rise in popularity. Skill class is moderately fine. I would say mutants are probably the best off here alongside the Mystics. Cosmic is completely screwed, and Tech is actually hindered a lot as well. So what I'm going to do now is highlight some of the champions that are slowed down least by Fisticuffs. For instance, Human Touch. Obviously, that's no flames because it's passive, and it's one of the very few science champions that does not necessarily rely on debuffs if you choose to go no flames. So I do kind of expect to see some resurgence of Human Touch. Yes, you might take a little bit more block damage, but again, at the same point, Human Touch will not have to wait 20 seconds to get his, damage going. Quite huge. Silk, obviously, does rely on debuffs a lot, but the key thing with Silk is that once you are close to that level 2 territory, you can just kind of nuke down, and it's almost as if first 10-15 seconds of the fight matter very little. In addition, her evade will still function perfectly, so you can push opponent to a special, bait that out, and then you can, go up and completely try and nuke them with a single level 2, which is a similar reason why I actually think Red Guardian could be a solid pick, because he kind of gets almost all of his damage going with level 2 and then follow up heavy attacks. So you can use your first 20 seconds just to build up to level 2 with him. And then if there will be people willing to rank up Red Hulk, which I think is actually a very, very solid candidate for arriving in the contest as a 7-star soon, but also a decent slept on champion, because obviously he's a science champion that does not rely on debuffs at all, which is extremely rare. And I think Red Hulk might shine with Fisticuffs. Now, in skill class, some of the nicer, better options, I'd say, probably Black Cat as well, because Black Cat has her ramp-up period, again, up until the time you drop your level 2. You ramp up your combo, you ramp up your cruelties, everything along the way, and then vast majority of the damage comes once you drop that level 2 and pause the bleeds, which I think could obviously be quite helpful, and she could still work relatively well without getting interfered with too much. Masakura is a very similar case. He doesn't really need those debuffs as long as you get them back incinerated and drop that level 2 in the block. He's still going to do a ton of damage. Besides, opponents are immune to his incinerates, so he's going to inflict instant burst damage. So yeah, I think Masakura is going to be an absolute monster. Another side note here before I move forward. I do think that, again, this meta is unfortunately gimping some of my favorite champions. Fisticuffs is definitely not kind to some of my favorite champions. That includes Kingpin, because Kingpin is basically going to be, like all Kingpins will start the fight as if they will have no sig ability and they don't have any rages, which means Kingpin's going to be significantly slower, which is very annoying. Anyways, moving on, Onslaught primarily relies on passives, and if opponents are immune to the debuffs, then obviously he inflicts passive instead. I think Onslaught is going to be an absolute monster. Science class again, Havoc, because most of his stuff is passive, and not to mention the killing blow is level 3, and by that time Fisticuffs will have expired. So I think Havoc can function perfectly fine. I think Bishop's going to be similar. Disable the, crits through block with the dex. Parry a handful of times, take a few hits in a block whilst they are not critical. Build up to your level 2. By that time, Fisticuffs is over, and level 2 nuke. And I think level 2 nuke in general, when it comes to the mutant class, will enable quite a few mutants to work still perfectly fine, because we can talk about the last bit that I'm going to explain a bit later, but definitely stay tuned for that. Then we're going to have Shocker. Out of Tech champions, Tech class at large, I think is troubled more than most people realize, because again, not being able to access your buffs or inflict debuffs hurt most of the tech champions significantly because a lot of them are quite dependent on having that armor up buff or access to their debuffs. There are a handful of champs that will function, just fine, like Starkhand Spider-Man. Again, I do think he's going to be quite good, as well as I think Shocker is going to be one of the most significant champions in the Fisticuffs meta, because why wouldn't he be? He doesn't really need buffs or debuffs. Then we have Penny Parker. Again, your level 2 your level 1 doesn't inflict debuffs. You still get your full ramp up by the time you're going to drop your ramped up level 2. Fisticuffs is going to be over. I think Ghost is going to be making a comeback, and I'm going to explain that in a bit. And then in Cosmic class, from what I can say, I think Hercules is going to be pretty much the best champion out there. If you need somebody else from the Cosmic class, then I could mention possibly Hulkling, but even he's going to be delayed, but not as much, because again, Hulkling, you just kind of want to get to 2.5 bars of power or so, and then just drop your level 2 in the block and kind of finish out the fight quick. Moving on to the Mystic class, Chavez is one of the champions that's affected by this the least, because she doesn't rely on debuffs or buffs or passive or stun debuffs again. Her passive stun will bypass the Fisticuffs just perfectly fine. Longshot, again, I'm going to explain that in a bit. Hood, I think, is going to be another powerhouse. And then obviously Absorbing Man, again, not relying on things like that. Okay, so why did I list Longshot and Ghost in the Fisticuffs meta? Because there is a very, very solid chance that in Gladiator Circuit, when it comes to more competitive play, we're going to see a lot more recoil players running around. Because Fisticuffs will not only obviously disable Liquid Courage Double Edge from your defenders, which means your defenders will effectively still have all their defensive utility minus the recoil damage, but still you're not going to at least have gimped abilities from having extra debuffs on you, or take damage from poison or bleed the entire fight. And obviously all your attackers will function perfectly fine. So in pure theory, vast majority of the fights, when you use the nukiest of the champions, could potentially get closed out with a single level 2 where you can avoid taking recoil damage, or at most will require you to throw like 2 specials, which is 5% of the health, which is, I think, still a worthwhile sacrifice considering the speed differential. So this might be the first meta since the current change where we actually see recoil decks being used, and that enables a whole different set of champions perform significantly better than they otherwise would, because of the level 2 nukes. Because there are some set of champions who do not have any attack modifiers in their base kit, but get significantly better with them. This will obviously involve champions like Ghost and Longshot, whose level 2 is going to become significantly more impactful in Nuki, for instance. This still works extremely well on guaranteed critical hit champions who do not have any attack modifiers in their kit, like Bullseye potentially. Like there is very little, stopping Bullseye from being significantly more effective in offense with his guaranteed crits, or even seeing champions like Misty Knight, for instance. Which again, I genuinely think Misty Knight could be a sleeper defender as well in the Fisticuffs meta, and there will potentially be some more interesting things to see, because Fisticuffs do take care of majority of the downside of the recoil masteries as well. Let me know what you guys think. Will we see recoil resurgence for the first 2 weeks of the upcoming Battleground season? And let me know, how hard are you gonna go in the next PG season? Either way, look forward to hearing from you in the comment section, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have